Thank you, everybody. It's a pleasure to be here. Thank you, Claudia. I'd like to tell you a little bit about myself first. My name's Jon Ezrine, and Nexidia is my company. And what we're all about is unlocking the power of customer insight. And what that means is that there's all this information that's bottled away, and in many ways, I like to ask. I like to start with asking people, how is a contact center like a potato? And I gave this slide to somebody the other day, and the answer was, well, in the call center, it's sort of like we're buried under the dirt for a long time. I said, no, that's not really what I'm looking for. And I said, is it something to do with a hot potato? There's always all these hot issues that get passed our way, and we're one place in the organization that's responsible for dealing with all these issues. And it's like, no, that's not really what I'm looking for either. I think the real answer is that the contact center is a lot like a potato because there's so much power that's locked away in such a small thing. Albert Einstein, I remember, had one of his lectures where he talked about how there's enough nuclear material in a potato to wipe out an entire city like New York. And if you think about it, the call center is not, something that could wipe out. I guess it could wipe out the entire company, but there's enough information buried into all these customer contacts that if there's just a way to unlock those things, we could use them to really fuel an enormous amount of insight and change within the organization. And that's what I'd like to talk about today. And before we get started, I'd like to get to know you a little bit better, and this is a little bit of a repeat of what Claudia did. I wanted to go through and do a quick survey of what best describes your organizational role. I'm expecting that many of you are in customer care, but perhaps some are from marketing and sales, IT, maybe operations or product finance. How would you describe your role? So 60% customer care, that doesn't surprise me. A few of you are in marketing and sales, or probably if you're in customer care, probably have some type of relationship with people in marketing and sales, right? Not too many IT. Operations, maybe almost a quarter of us, and very little bit on product and none on finance. That's probably good. We don't have to worry about that today. This is important because regardless of what your role is in the organization, there's information that's locked away that if we can find a way to harness that, it can help fuel what you're doing. And if you think about customer interaction analytics, if we can analyze all those interactions that are happening, there are three primary areas where we are able to delve deeper and get good information about the organization. First, probably many of you heard or work on programs that are entitled Voice of the Customer. And what does that mean and what is it all about? For us, Voice of the Customer is all about being able to get insights from customers and use them in the organization to drive things. So if you're in customer care, obviously it's important to understand what your customers think about your care, your products, your organization, but think about how important this can be to marketing and sales. If I can get insight on a daily basis, immediate feedback on the products, on the solutions, on the campaigns we have. It's also important for the product side of the house. If you have products that you're launching and you want to get good insight about them, the way that most companies are doing this is by focus groups, surveys, and other types of ways of gathering information that take a long time to pull together, but you're interacting with customers every day. So if there's a way to be able to grab those insights while they're happening, how valuable could that be? Product and process optimization is the second area where we see a huge amount of insight. We also sometimes call that failure demand, and it's all about figuring out where something is broken in a process based on what's going on with customers so that we can figure out how to go correct those things. And frequently what we find is that is the Pareto effect, that 10% of these of the problems cause 80-90% of the cost and the headaches to deal with these issues. So if we can understand what the root cause of these issues are, then what can we do to go and eliminate those problems from the beginning? Maybe so a customer doesn't even have to call us in the first place. And so this is very important for customer care, but for finance and for IT and for operations, this is a huge part of the value that's locked away inside that call center potato. And then lastly, performance management. It's probably very important to many of you working inside customer care, being a customer care executive. How do you manage the performance of the people that are providing customer care in your organization? You know, is it based on listening to evaluations every month, or is it based on cold hard data that allows you to be able to understand who are the best performers and who are the people that need some extra help? So these are all the different areas that we think we focus in on, and it addresses every part of the organization. Now, there's been an evolution in interaction analytics. How many people, how many of you, just by way of hands, are involved in analytics in some regard today, doing some type of analytics? How many more of you are not yet involved in analytics, but are exploring it, trying to understand what it means and what's possible with analytics? Anybody in that category? So there's been a big evolution in what analytics is all about. It began with the first stage, which I call random sampling. And many of you probably do that or have been doing this for years. And that's all about being able to randomly select interactions, listen to them, and fill out an evaluation. Or if somebody has a question around how are we handling a certain problem, well, let's put some headphones on, go listen to some interactions, create a tick sheet to determine whether or not, you know, what the cause of that is or whether or not the right outcome is happening, and then we'll analyze those results. Right? It's good because by putting the earphones on, we can hear the anecdotes, we can understand and listen to the customer talk themselves. We can understand what's going on, but it's very limited in our ability to reach everything. And that kind of led to the second phase, which I call targeted listening. And this is where speech analytics vendors have come into play. How many of you are doing any type of speech analytics today? Not too many, but a few. So speech analytics, it sounds confusing. A lot of people, when they ask me, well, what is speech analytics? They assume that it has something to do with just listening to the words people say. And while that's true, what speech analytics really is all about at a targeted listening phase is being able to filter the things that you want to listen to based on words and phrases that are said. So instead of listening to calls randomly from beginning to end, I might be able to listen only to calls where there was a particular sales promotion that was mentioned, or a customer with a particular type of problem, or where a particular product was brought up. So it allows me to pick up where random sampling leaves off, and that is finding the relevant samples of things to listen to and get good insights from it. The analytics that comes from that is typically very anecdotal. And what that means is I can have 100 examples of a customer that had a particular issue or a particular problem, and I can listen to them, and I can put myself into the customer's shoes and understand what their issue was, and that can be very helpful for me to figure out how to make a change, right? Or I can listen to an agent, and I can see how do they deal with a particular type of problem. Do they do it the right way? Can I fill out an evaluation? Can I coach them? Can I do something that's going to help them deal with that issue? But the limitations of targeted listening is that it's hard to be everywhere at once, and it's hard to measure what's going on, and that's what's brought up the third phase of analytics, and that's what I call statistically valid metrics and modeling. And what this is all about is being able to measure something. And being an American, I like to always talk about baseball. So the analogy I give is it's like in baseball, everything is about statistics. What's someone's batting average? How often do they get on base? What's their slugging percentage? For pitchers, there's a whole array of, and I'm sure it's the same with every sport, but with baseball, it's particularly metric driven. And it can be the same thing in the contact center. It's all about being able to create measures and metrics to figure out who's doing well and who needs some help. What is best practice, and how far away from that best practice am I? So metrics in the contact center might be every time I have a customer that hasn't bought a particular product, what's the percentage of time that this agent might make an offer to them? And what's the percentage of time that offer gets accepted? Those are things that we're able to capture using speech analytics for data that sometimes isn't captured anywhere else in the organization. There's some differences in targeted listening and in statistical metrics and modeling. Starting with performance management, you're probably familiar with selecting agents, getting calls for particular topics, and filling out an evaluation form. But what if you had the ability to determine who the bottom quartile of your team was based on a specific initiative? Which agents have the longest handle time for a particular type of objection that comes up? Because maybe that is an area that we can focus on and make a change with. And I can take the people in the bottom quartile and move them up to the next quartile. For voice of the customer initiatives, a good targeted listening example might be targeting calls of a specific topic just to understand a customer's sentiment. Are the customers happy with the new program we have, or do I want to have good hard empirical data to do a correlation analysis of the last 90 days of all of my customers who have defected or who have canceled by a particular reason why they told us that they canceled? Which one gives us more information? And what I think you'll find is that by having the data available, that's the kind of data that you need to be influential in the organization. Product optimization and or product and process optimization the same way. Is it sampling calls that are escalated to figure out what changes in the processes might be made, or is it doing a cost-benefit analysis to be able to reduce something like illegitimate truck rolls or some type of escalation that happens? So what does the data look like? Traditional metadata, traditional data about customer interactions that you're probably very familiar with. It comes from CRM systems. It comes from phone switches. It might come from customer survey platforms. Looks like the information I have at the left. It's about customer tenure. It's about account balances, what products customers have, the demographics of customers. It's a lot of information about the agents and the supervisors, how long they're on the phone call. There might be survey results. These are things that you typically have. It might be quality scores that you're building. But the information that comes out of the audio that can be extracted from interactions that maybe doesn't exist today would be things like caller intent. Why exactly is the caller calling me based on his own reasons? What are the behaviors that happen by both the caller and the agent? What type of discontent is mentioned? What type of troubleshooting techniques are used? You know, are the customers confused? Are there ways of measuring these things statistically and empirically that you can rely on in your data? That's the type of data that we're talking about. And I think that there's a new workflow that's being built when you have this kind of data. It starts on the left with organizing the information that you need. What are the metrics that you want to be able to understand? If you could create any KPI about any type of thing that happens within a phone call or within a customer contact, and it doesn't have to be a phone call either. It can be some type of text, social media, or some other type of interaction. How do you organize what those topics are, and then use a metric-based reporting to investigate where the anomalies are? And then once you investigate what these issues are, what type of predictive models can we build that explain why customers leave, when they're likely to buy something from us or expand their relationship with us, when they're likely to downgrade? What is their customer satisfaction? Can we predict, based on what's happening in the call, without having to wait for a survey, whether they're happy or unhappy with us? Can we get a net promoter score or some other type of measure by just listening to the interaction in a way that is objective? And then once we have those models built, then we can build a performance management system to measure how we're doing as an organization and how individuals and teams are doing against those missions. And when we measure those things, it becomes a big vicious loop. So if the contact center is a potato, what can we do with the potential of that potato? I was a little bit hungry when I was building these slides, obviously. But the idea is, what exactly could you expect to be able to accomplish if you are using an analytically driven methodology to drive information out of your contact center? And so what I've done is I've pulled together a few examples of some of the way it would look to you if you were doing some type of customer interaction analytics. And the first step is discovery. Discovery is all about understanding what are the key topics and the key issues that are happening inside my center. And what I have here is a real-world word cloud that we built with a customer, with a wireless customer, that was looking at all of their customers with low net promoter scores. And we wanted to understand what were the topics of things that were coming out of there. And as you can see from some of the topics here, a lot of the things that rose to the top were people that were upset with something. You know, it's ridiculous was the largest thing that came out, which was a great indicator for us that something's wrong, because people don't usually say things like that when they're really happy. One of the other things that doesn't appear on this screen that we found that was an enormous indicator of customers being happy is laughter. And one of the things that we've been measuring in calls is how often do you hear the customer laugh on the phone, which sounds a little bit unconventional, right? But if a customer's laughing, usually that's a pretty good indicator that something's going right, unless like it's an evil, sinister laugh, right? But this type of word cloud is really helpful to be able to understand the difference between the customers that have very good customer sat levels or very low, or looking at the difference between customers where a certain offer is made versus another offer. And it allows us to discover what key topics or what themes we want to drill deeper into. Drilling deeper is the next step, and what I'm showing you now is a dashboard that we've put together, and this is where we've built a bunch of key performance metrics about different topics that are happening in the contact center where the data might not exist in any other way. And for this organization, we've built a cost to serve metric, a customer retention metric, a revenue growth metric, and a compliance and risk metric. These were, for this customer, many of the different areas that they were wanting to focus on. The problem that this customer had was that there weren't a lot of metrics to be able to measure some of the different things that they wanted to look at. They could measure average handle time, and they could understand what their transfer rates were, but they couldn't do it based on key topics or key themes that were happening in the calls. Right? So sometimes the data that you have isn't granular enough, and what we wanted to do was be able to build the granularity where it can be drilled down, and where at a moment's notice people can put their fingers on exactly what's driving the behaviors that we're looking for. And then it moves down to performance management. What if there was a way for every individual in your organization to measure how they're doing on a particular type of call with a particular objective? We call them quality initiatives. So a quality initiative might be something like, I'm a customer care rep, and my job is to evaluate what the problem the customer has, diagnose what it is, and then come up with troubleshooting techniques for it. Well, how good am I at doing each of those steps depending on what the problem is? And maybe I can measure that and have a traffic light that tells me whether I'm doing well or whether I need a little bit of help. And then I can drill down into each individual to see where that individual is performing. This is what we think the future will look like for performance management, as opposed to just randomly listening to 5 or 6 calls a month and evaluating with a very small sample size. Predictive analytics is the next area that we see an enormous amount of focus in. And what you're looking at here is a statistical model we built for one of our communications companies. This is a company that has over 25 million subscribers. And the problem that they have is that every month this company loses about 2% of their customer base. So that ends up being about 500,000 customers defect every month. And they came to us and said, we need to find a way to use the data inside our customer interactions to figure out what the key would be to find these customers before they leave, so that we could do something differently about that. And so what we did is we built a predictive model. And a predictive model is nothing more than looking at all of the customers and the things that are happening to determine, is there a clue that there's a customer that's about to fly into the mountain, so to speak. And if we can find them right before they fly into the mountain and change their course and save them, then we've won. And so what we did is we built a model where we looked across the bottom here. We tried to predict what was the likelihood from most likely to least likely that this customer would defect within the next 4 months. And we built 3 different models. The first model we built, which is the red line, was looking just at the data that exists out of the phone switch and the CRM and the billing and all the readily available data that you probably are familiar with. And it was pretty good at predicting which customers would leave. And then we built, the blue line represents looking at the audio data to try to understand, is there something that we can look at what customers are saying to us that would indicate which ones are about to leave? And when we created that line, you can see that it's similar. It's a little bit better at the beginning, and then it falls a little bit behind the metadata. But the gold line represents putting those datas together. So we're looking at not only the data that's readily available, like the CRM data and the phone switch data and the billing data, but also what's happening on the interaction. And when we put those two things together, we had this enormous lift in the predictability of which customers would leave. And that's represented by that gold area. This uplift for our customer has the potential, if they can improve by a tenth of a percent their defect rate, they'll save $70 million a month. Now, we don't believe that they're necessarily going to save all of that, but it's a huge, huge, huge opportunity for them. And the reason why they're getting that lift, and what this lift means is, and I've got a line drawn here at the 10%, is that the top 10% of the customers that we're predicting are saying things that indicate that they might leave, represents almost 80% of the customers that ultimately left. So if we can just figure out who they are and do something differently about it, then it makes a big impact. And that leads us into the last area, I think, of the future is real-time supervision. If we can listen for things in the call when they're happening in real time, if we know the things that are driving dissatisfaction or customer churn or likelihood to buy, can we monitor for these things, suggest stuff to the agents on their screen, and in this screen what you're seeing is a supervisor workstation where a supervisor is being notified when different things are going on. It can be for compliance reasons, it can be to help the agents out, it can be to make sure that the agent has the information that they need, right, in real time during the call. So to wrap up, I'd like to ask a question back to you. Where are you in your organization? What best describes your organization's stage of maturity when it comes to analytics? First, are you in the situation where you don't capture any customer interactions at all? You don't record? Do you record for quality assurance and regulatory reasons, but that's about it? Thirdly, do you use speech analytics to identify and listen to examples of call types? Are you building metrics and KPIs based on the events that are happening? Are you extracting data and doing predictive models? Or lastly, are you using these predictive models in real time to change the flow of interactions that you have? I'd be interested in seeing where everybody is here. So most of you are at number 2, that you're recording calls, you're using that for quality assurance or regulatory reasons, but maybe not getting a lot of use out of it. And if you're in that category, then it might be a good time for you to investigate what the potential could be and how you can maybe get more out of that asset that you have. There's a lot of potential there. It looks like about, let's see, a quarter of you are somewhere beyond that, either using analytics to identify what you're listening to, or you're now building KPIs and other metrics, and you're pretty much on the front wave of things. So, with that, I appreciate your participation, and thank you very much. Let me know if there's time for questions or anything.